All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of We Need Our Space. Now, last week, if you were with us, we talked a little bit about the summer evening sky and what you can find in your summer sky, the constellations, some planets, some deep sky objects, some moons. Well, this week, we're going to talk about the planets, specifically what you can find in your summer evening sky just after sunset and towards midnight. That's why I have this nifty Mars, Jupiter. So you can find those in your summer sky tonight. So let me take myself out of this picture here. There we go. And let's do some exploring of what you can find in your summer evening sky just after sunset. In fact, right after this show. So right after sunset, actually right before sunset, you can begin to see some of the stars and some of the planets. You'll be able to find Jupiter and Saturn as very bright, well, not very bright objects, but particularly bright objects, easy to find with your naked eye. And when I say your naked eye, I mean you won't need to use binoculars or a telescope. You can easily go outside and look up and see these objects. So you will find Jupiter first, a very bright object, and then you will find Saturn almost to the left of Jupiter. Now we'll cover Mars in a second here, but let's actually go out and visit Jupiter up close. And we're going to be taking a look at some of the actual images of Jupiter and some computer models that we can fly up to and look at the orbits of the moons and whatnot. So on our way over to Jupiter, some facts on the Jupiter here. Well, Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. And we can see it in our evening summer sky just after sunset, even though it resides about 395 million miles away. Now we see it so far away because it is so big, reflecting light back from the sun. And Jupiter doesn't produce its own light, of course. It reflects it from our sun, our own star, the sun. It's so large that you could fit 11 Earths across Jupiter's equator. Now, if Earth were the size of a grape, then Jupiter would be about the size of a basketball. Now, in fact, Jupiter is considered to be a failed star. Now, it never got big enough to start burning. This is because it's made of the same stuff that stars are made of, mainly hydrogen and helium. Now it's covered in these swirling cloud stripes. It has these circular storms like the Great Red Spot. If you look just below the Great Red Spot, you can see some of the quote-unquote the pearls of Jupiter, these counterclockwise swirling sort of whitish storms just below the red spot. Well, these stripes and swirls are actually cold, windy clouds of ammonia and water, floating in an atmosphere of hydrogen and helium. Jupiter is what is called a gas giant, because it has no solid surface. However, it is believed that it might have a solid or a very dense liquid metal core. This would be about the size of planet Earth. Right at the center. That's what it's believed to be at the center of this gas giant here. Now, of course, we all know of Jupiter's Great Red Spot, but did you know that it's actually a hurricane that has been going on for over 150 years? People have said that it is so large you could fit 3 planet Earths side by side. But the Great Red Spot has actually been shrinking over the years. It's now about the size of 2 planet Earths. Well, Jupiter is also home to 79 confirmed moons. I'm going to back away from the planet a little bit here to see these moons. Now, 4 of which are known as the Galilean Moons. The Galilean Moons is kind of hard to say, since they were first discovered by Galileo Galilei in 1610. Now, these 4 moons include Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. Now, again, you can find Jupiter tonight, a little after sunset, whenever the show's over with. So look for 2 bright objects over in the east. The brighter of those 2 is going to be Jupiter. Now, you can get the Stellarium app on your phone to help you locate this. In fact, there are many apps you can choose to help you locate objects in the sky. They have an app that will help you locate the International Space Station as well. I have a couple on my phone. Stellarium's pretty good, though. Well, Jupiter has a very thin ring system. It's kind of hard to see. It's there, but again, pretty hard to see. But one planet we all know that has very beautiful, very prominent rings, that is going to be Saturn. And you can find Saturn to the left of Jupiter, also in your sky. So you can spot these 2 planets, again, just after sunset, and they will be in the sky all throughout the night. Well, Saturn and Jupiter are known as the gas giants, meaning there are no solid surface to land on. There's also not really a place to land on those rings of Saturn either. The rings of Saturn are made up of billions of particles of ice, dust, rock, and debris. It's these chunks of ice that make these rings so reflective, so noticeable. Now, some of these are as small as a grain of sand, the debris, the chunks of ice that is. Some of them are as small as a grain of sand, some of them are as large as a house or even a school bus. Now, one theory on how Saturn got its rings is that it is from the carcasses of dwarf planets. Yet another story, another theory, is that the rings are the result of debris left over from comets, asteroids, and shattered moons. So Saturn sounds pretty rock and roll, having these shattered moons orbiting around it. Well, the rings are actually named in alphabetical order. Working out from the planet, you've got C, B, and ring A. Now, the innermost D ring is extremely faint. Also, like Jupiter, Saturn is made up mostly of hydrogen and helium. And again, like Jupiter, Saturn has a whole lot of moons. You've got 53 moons with another 29 unconfirmed. Most of those are going to be dwarf moons, and some of these moons are even going to be called shepherd moons. These are the moons inside the rings of Saturn that sort of keep the rings uniform and orderly. Now, it seems like we know a lot more. It seems like we would know a lot more about Saturn with all of our modern technology, but there's still a whole lot more that we have to learn about this planet and all of its moons. Now, when you see it in the sky with your naked eye, it will appear much dimmer than Jupiter. Well, Saturn is much further away. It's about 840 million miles away from us. That's so far that it even takes light 83 minutes to reach it from the sun. Now, it takes light to reach us about 8 minutes. That's from the sun to us, 8 minutes. 83 minutes for Saturn. And there's nothing that travels faster than light. Well, Saturn is, again, a huge place. It's not as big as Jupiter, but it is pretty huge. Now, it has a volume equivalent of about 760 Earths. It's about 95 times Earth's mass. And Saturn has some pretty crazy moons also. We've got Titan. Titan is slightly larger than Mercury, and it is the second largest moon in the solar system, behind Jupiter's moon, Ganymede. We also have Pan and Atlas, and these are shaped almost like flying saucers. And next up, you've got, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Iapetus? Iapetus. I must be correct. This moon of Saturn has one side that is bright as snow and has another side that is dark as coal. And then, of course, you have Enceladus. If you've seen any of these shows here, I've mentioned Enceladus on quite the occasion because it has these really cool ice volcanoes. Yes, it has these geysers, these volcanoes that spew ice into the atmosphere. It goes up into the atmosphere because the gravity is so thin on Enceladus. Rains back down. And it is as fine as talcum powder. Currently, there are no future plans to visit Saturn. The scientists have proposed missions to probe the icy moon Enceladus or Titan. Now, these explorations could involve submarines or modified rovers. Well, again, you can find Jupiter and Saturn pretty easily right before bedtime, and as midnight approaches, you will be able to find Mars over there on the eastern horizon. So if you had a good time finding Jupiter and Saturn, then you will have a hoot finding Mars. Unfortunately, you will have to wait a little late at night, but if you look for that bright red object appearing over in the east, you have probably found Mars. Now, don't confuse Mars with the star Antares. Antares and Scorpius the Scorpion. It looks like Mars, but it's not as bright. So Antares actually means the rival of Mars. People often mistook it for Mars. But you'll find Mars over here on the eastern horizon as midnight approaches. Now, Mars is a very cold desert world, and it is about half the size of Earth. It's about 55 million miles from Earth. Now, contrary to popular belief, it is not 30 seconds to Mars. Actually, it takes light 11 minutes to go all the way from the sun to reach Mars. By the way, the band name 30 Seconds to Mars comes from a line in a Harvard thesis paper describing how technology is growing exponentially and how one day humans will be 30 seconds to Mars. So if you take it literally, you would have to travel 6 times faster than the speed of light to reach Mars in 30 seconds from Earth, when Mars is at its closest approach to Earth. So there you go. There's your 30 seconds to Mars trivia question for the day. Trivia answer. Now, it's known as the Red Planet. That's pretty much due to the rusty iron in the ground. Now, Mars is kind of like Earth in that it too has seasons. It's got polar ice caps, it even has volcanoes, it's got canyons, and it even has weather. Now, however, its atmosphere is very thin and made up of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and argon. And there has been some evidence suggesting that Mars had water at some point. However, Mars has a very small core, a much smaller core than Earth. It also has much weaker gravity and a very thin atmosphere. This resulted in any of that water evaporating out into space. Now, that being said, Mars still has some trace amounts of water. Now, this will be mainly in the frozen polar ice caps. But sometimes during the Martian summer, there has been some of this muddy, brackish water that sort of rolls down the Martian hillsides. Well, we talked a bit about Saturn and Jupiter and how they were gas giants, but Mars is what is a terrestrial planet just like Earth. It even has a day that lasts a little bit over 24 hours. So I think it's 24.6 hours to be precise. Now, Earth has just one moon, one lonely moon. Well, Mars has 2 moons that are thought to be, well, these moons are probably captured asteroids. They even take a look at them here. They look like captured asteroids. Well, these moons are called Phobos and Deimos. Phobos is actually slowly spiraling in towards Mars, and Deimos is actually slowly moving away. It's actually set to leave Mars' gravitational influence sometime in the future. Far into the future. Well, I can't talk about Mars without bringing up 2 of the most prominent geological features. Mars has this one huge gash. It looks like a huge scar along its surface. And this is called Valles Marineris. It's a canyon. It's kind of like the Grand Canyon, but this canyon on Mars is so large it could actually span the entire width of the United States or Australia. It's believed that it was either caused by a large body bumping or scraping into it earlier on. But Mars, another theory is that it was created during the cooling down process that occurred, and whenever Mars was initially taking shape, and the tectonic plates of Mars just sort of cracked its surface. It's another prevailing theory here. Well, the other feature on Mars is called Olympus Mons. This is the largest mountain to be found in our solar system. It also is a dormant shield volcano. So large, you could actually fit 2 Louisianas next to each other. You've got one Louisiana right side up, and then if you could turn Louisiana upside down and then put it almost like a jigsaw puzzle next to the left-hand Louisiana, I guess, you could fit 2 Louisianas on top of that shield volcano. It's so big. Well, there you have it. Those are some of the planets that we can find in our summer sky. Again, if you're just joining us, you can find Jupiter and Saturn over in the eastern horizon after sunset. Actually, a little bit before sunset, but easily spotted just after sunset. And then as midnight approaches, you can find Mars. All right, folks. It's beginning to rain here, I think. So I will see you next week for We Need Our Space.